I'd like to just ask you about one of your quotes. I love this little book. I know I did a little video on it, Our Father, little sayings from God the Father. But this one here, again, this one was revolutionary for me. When I read this, I think I was still a teenager, but it gave me so much encouragement. And this is it. You wrote, try. This one word sums up all I ask of you. And when I read that, I was just like, you know what? I'm a mess. I'm a work in progress. I keep falling and getting up. But if there's one thing I think I'm doing is I'm trying. And if that's all God the Father asks of me, maybe I'm doing okay. Do you want to just comment? Do you remember that quote?
Yeah, I mean, I remember then, and I remember now, and I know specifically how it's affected um, my own fatherhood and how I father my children. I think we live in an accomplishment addicted society, and one of the things I've learned, through passages like this about fathering, is if my child gets a great grade in school, I I shouldn't praise the grade, okay? Because it's not really the grade that matters the most. It's how my child approached the work, and the outcome is the grade,
Mm.
And so my daughter did just fantastic in an area that she'd been really struggling with prior to this year, and she worked really hard. When she got her grades, she was so happy and so excited. But what I said to her is, I said, Isabel, I'm so proud of how hard you worked, how hard you tried. I know you really struggled in this last year, and I want you to know that I'm delighted that you got that grade. But what I'm proud of is how hard you worked and how hard you tried to get that grade, because I want her to know that my love is not conditional. It's certainly not on a grade, and um, that the things I want to praise the things in her that God would praise in her,
Yeah.
and so that's what that particular passage makes me think of.
Yeah. I meet a lot of people. I mean, we're all struggling, but I think some people they really think God is mad at them, or they're not pleasing to God because again they're struggling. They're not doing the best. But I can see that they're trying so hard, and and I just think to know that all God asks of us is that we try, because, we grow little by little, is just so important for people. Let's turn to your book, Life is Messy. Great book. Now, this is interesting. When I read the first little section there, the first installment, it's kind of amusing. You talk about life is messy, you can't change that, and I'm thinking, oh, this is fun. But then it's like you a little later you go into the deep end, and it's almost like when I was a kid learning how to swim, they take us into the deep end, and sometimes it felt scary deep. It was so deep, and you get deep there at a number of points. But at one point you describe how every year between Thanksgiving and Christmas, New Year, you reflect on the year. And one of the questions you ask yourself was this the best year of my life? And you said for 30 consecutive years, every year was the best year ever. And then you had a year where, no, it was the worst year. And you thought, okay, probably just a glitch. Then you had the next year, it was even worse. And you said you went through three brutal years. Yeah, the following year was worse again. Do you want to just comment? And then you get into the dark night of the soul, John of the Cross. Do you want to just comment on the reality that like the gospel is not prosperity gospel? Everything is going to be perfect in my life. I'm not going to have any struggles. Not only will we have struggles, but in the Catholic tradition, we learn about these purifications, these dark nights. Saint Faustina writes about the Dark Knight, St. John of the Cross, St. Teresa of Avila, others. Do you want to share just what this Dark Knight is about?
Yeah, so maybe first let's talk about why I chose to share that. I chose to share it because I mean, they really were 3 very miserable years of my life, very, very difficult years of my life. Um, and while that's happening, everything else is still going on. And I live a public life. And I think sometimes um, when we live a public life, people can stop thinking of us as people, and can make the mistake of thinking, oh, well, he's got a great life, or he's got it all together, or whatever. And I wanted to not only dispel that myth, but I wanted to crush that myth. Um, this is a book I never intended to write. It's based on my own personal journals from those 3 worst years of my life. But as last year began to unfold and a COVID experience, I think so many of us started to see the cracks in our lives, the cracks in our culture. And I wanted to talk about this brokenness that we all experience. And, the central question of the book that I propose is can something that has been devastatingly broken be put back together and be more beautiful and more lovable than ever before? And we struggle with that question because in our consumer addicted society, if we break something, we throw it away and buy another one. But what do we do with our broken selves? What do we do with our broken relationships, our broken institutions? These cannot be thrown away, and you can't buy a new one. And this is the dilemma that we face in this sort of disposable culture. And it's a dilemma that leads to an incredible amount of self-loathing in people. I would say especially religious people. I think it's a dilemma that leads to many, many people feeling woefully inadequate, especially spiritual people. And that is not how God wants us to think or feel. But in order to get to where the mind of God is, we have to make sense, make peace with our brokenness. Mm-hmm. And so, at the beginning of the book, I do share about that very, very dark time in my life. But then I do take the book, I believe, each reader will have to decide for themselves. I do take the book then to what I believe is a very hopeful place, and hopefully a very helpful place. But that darkness is, again, we spoke about mystical experiences earlier. I believe a lot more people experience this dark night, but they don't recognize it as that, or they brush it aside, or they think there's something wrong with them. I think that, like, when we experience fear, or when we experience depression or anxiety or doubt or whatever, I think very often people think that they are malfunctioning as a human being, and the exact opposite is true. When we feel fear or depression or anxiety, our whole being is working exactly as God created it to. Our being is throwing a flag and saying, hey, pay attention, there's a problem here. And the dark night of the soul is like an extreme experience of that, right? Mm-hmm. But very often we ignore it, or we don't know how to approach it, or we don't know who to talk about it. I think it's astounding. I think one of the great sadnesses of our age is that there are an enormous number of people who, if they have a spiritual question, they don't actually know someone who they can bring that spiritual question to, who will sit with it and take it seriously.
Yeah.
It's one of the great poverties of our time, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you highlight, I was going to bring this up, and just for our viewers to catch this, because this is central in your book. You ask the question, can something that has been broken be put back together in a way that makes it more beautiful than ever before? And do you mind if I give a spoiler here? The answer is yes, our creator God can do that, and he is doing that, and it's a beautiful thing. Yeah, just a real kind of hope for all of us, because we're all, we're all earthen vessels, or another crackpots, and a lot of brokenness. So just a tremendous hope